Hey, good afternoon. This is Vip Vipperman with our new Eagle Venture Fund podcast. Excited this morning to have a chance to welcome co-host Raymond Burr all the way from Switzerland and our guest today, Ryan O'Donnell. Excited to have him share with us about the company that he's building and the work that he's doing to impact the foster care and child welfare system in America. Ryan, thanks so much for being with us this morning.
Yes, sir.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, Ray. So good to have a co-host from across the planet. What's going on today?
Well, I'm glad you guys are just waking up. I'm getting ready to go to bed soon.
Yes, absolutely. Well, this morning we'll jump right in. I wanted to get started off. Ryan, tell us a little bit about your background before we jump into your case plan. Just how you got started as an entrepreneur, where you're from, what gets you going.
Yeah, my story as an entrepreneur starts actually way back. I was 18 years old. I was in high school and was a part of this big food drive. We actually broke the Guinness World Record, the largest food drive at a single place in 24 hours. We raised over 500,000 pounds of food. We felt like we were on top of the world. And then we found out that the food bank distributes 100,000 pounds of food every operating hour. And it was like a punch to the gut. And I had just read a book by Muhammad Yunus, Banker to the Poor, and Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week. And I was like, there's got to be a way to solve big social problems, and maybe entrepreneurship is the way to go. So that kind of like lit the spark really young. And then as soon as I got to college, I started building my first startup.
Awesome. Yeah. So your case plan, the company we're going to share about today, is not your first rodeo. Give us just a little background on your previous startup if you can.
Yeah. My first startup was called Pennies for Progress. We built one of the first kind of national scale roundup for charity apps. So, back in 2011, 2012, people were still dropping coins in the physical, donation jars. And we made it easy for people to round up and donate in store or online. This is your classic student startup. Didn't make a lot of money, but we raised a lot of money for other people. And then after college, started an HR software company called Employ Us that helped about 30,000 people get jobs through referrals. So kind of went from the nonprofit world into the business world, focused on hiring, helping people build their teams, and then started our current company about a year ago after selling that last one.
Ryan, with reference to your first startup, what would you say were the like 2-3 most brutal lessons that you learned? Because I think that's what many people then, because of the pain, disengage, and you obviously persisted. So what were those brutal lessons that you learned, and what caused you to do the next one and the next one and the next one?
Yeah, well, you get a little bit of a chip on your shoulder when the first one doesn't work out as well as you'd hoped. So that's one. But I mean, I think the big thing for us is like, there's no impact without margin. So that gets said a lot in the social entrepreneurship world. But we had built I think a really good product, but we just really kind of failed to monetize it well. So we were charging a transaction fee on donations that was very, very small, and on paper it would work at scale. But, we didn't really capitalize the business well. We were structured as a nonprofit, which limited how much money we could raise and who we could raise from. And then we also had a revenue model that wasn't great. The biggest lesson learned, though, at the end of the day was, really good due diligence when it comes to partners and funders. We had some funders that really wanted us to focus small, regionally in North Carolina. And then when we hyper scaled and we had thousands of merchants raising money for tens of thousands of organizations across the country, that funder was not interested in impact outside of North Carolina. So it was some tough conversations related to that. And you just can never, I feel like, do enough good due diligence when it comes to raising money or deciding who you want to partner with, whether it's on your team or channel partners, integration partners, things like that.
What a great lesson. That's a good reminder for all the people that are building companies and investing, making sure that there's a good match between the investor and the entrepreneur. is such a key piece. How about the second company? Anything to take away from that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, almost in the opposite direction. Like we're structured as a for-profit. We had built I think, a really really good product, found a way to monetize it well, um, but it wasn't necessarily something that would have like VC scale. It was kind of like impact neutral. We were helping people get jobs, but there wasn't like a core social mission, which was kind of a large passion of mine that I didn't really get to like fully live into in that work. And we kind of got started, kind of thinking we'd be like the Uber of recruiting, and kind of bought into some of the hype. And relatively speaking, didn't raise too much money. But ultimately, we spent most of our time really like bootstrapping and just running it profitably. And
Hmm.
it didn't hyperscale, but we built a really good business that was profitable, helped a bunch of people get jobs. And I
Yeah.
think really what that just showed is like, at the end of the day, like, you want to make sure that your investors are aligned with where you want to take the business, but
Hmm.
also that like it's okay to like quote unquote have a lifestyle business if you can make a big impact. It's not okay to say you're going to do one thing and do the other, right?
Yeah.
So we ultimately were able to get acquired, have a good outcome, and grow it, and have a good result for ourselves, our customers, and the acquirer. Um, but that's a long, these things are like not short-term commitments. These are like decade-long projects, and it certainly was with the last one. And if you told 21-year-old Ryan he was going to spend a decade doing HR software, I would have
Uh,
said you were crazy. But here I am, having done a decade of HR software.
God, it's amazing how you end up starting down one direction and flipping a couple different times as you find your channel partners and the right fit for the organization. And it's amazing the path that the Lord takes you on.
Mm.
Well, man, talk to us about this new company. You've obviously got a huge heart for social impact. You've obviously got a huge heart just for people in general and wanting to see their lives transform for good, whether it's get jobs or find capital to serve well in their missions and that sort of thing. What drew you into this new company, your case plan?
Yeah, well, it really was kind of born out of experience my wife and I had as foster parents. So while
Okay.
we're building the last startup, my wife and I got licensed as foster parents back in 2019. The group came to our church, told us about the foster care crisis. Got, you know, 500 kids in our county child welfare system and only a few hundred foster parents. We had just bought our house. We were thinking about starting our family and decided, Lord was calling us to, put a child in foster care first. That was kind of what he put on our heart at that time.
Hmm.
And so we did our trainings, we got started, and our foster son was placed with us summer of 2019. And, everything changed. We got to see the system up close and personal.
Hmm.
And I can get into that whole story, but, it was shocking, and it felt like I was living in two different worlds. Tech startup land by day, foster parent 24/7, 365, dealing with the world of fax machines and snail mail.
Hmm.
And I just knew there had to be a better way because, like, we've got children's lives literally at stake here. We've got an entire family that has, tremendous amounts of pressure and problems associated with how the system interacts with them. And that we had to have a better way of actually making sure that we're protecting children, but also that we're strengthening families. And, when I think about doing good, it's about like, you actually leave people better off when you're out of their life. We're going to
Hmm.
jump into someone's life for a little bit. We want to have a good outcome. And what we saw was that all too often in the child welfare system, sometimes we're actually hurting, not helping. And we wanted to do something about that, which led to the creation of your case plan.
Ryan, quick question. The 10 years in HR, obviously you learned a whole lot of skills there, which helped you with your case plan. Can you give me like 2 or 3 or 4, if if you have more, obviously more, kind of skills that you learned along the way in doing various startups that when you were confronted with the challenge of your case plan that really stood you in good stead?
I'll give the first one is like super practical, right? Like, you have to do a lot of
Pragmatic.
background checks. You got to do a lot of drug screens. There's a lot of administrative processes in the child welfare system.
Hmm.
In the HR world, we figured out all of this. We were doing secure texting for candidates, secure scheduling for interviews, phone screens, background checks, drug screens, pre-employment assessments, document collection, like a million administrative processes that from a recruiting standpoint, we would compress down so that you could hire the best people as quickly as possible. But in the child welfare system, you're taking months to do a background check. You're not even communicating. You're communicating over like encrypted emails, not something that's mobile friendly, not texting. So I just got to see like what I feel like really good like customer experience was like when you tried to deliver a great recruiting experience at scale, and then got to see like how abysmal it was, not just for me as a foster parent, but like for the actual caseworkers, for the attorneys, for the actual families impacted by the system. So like that contrast just marked a very like clear picture. And then the other thing is just like, I think a lot of times, people kind of shy away from working with government because they might think they got some preconceived notions of what it's like to build a GovTech startup or work kind of in the public sector. And, what I saw was, all of this innovation happening in the private sector. And, government was like 10, 20 years behind. And all of the incumbents were honestly like embarrassingly bad. Like I look at options and I'm like, these are our tax dollars going to these things. So, for me, I spent so much time building products, thinking about like, how do you scale a product? How do you build the right one? How do you make it like delight users? And I just felt like that type of, perception was really missing when it came to products that were built for the public. And that's really kind of the kind of unique thing I feel like we're bringing to the table now is just like a very like relentless focus on building something that like actually makes a difference in the lives of families, that like actually is a joy to use. Because that's just, that is not the status quo in GovTech today. And certainly not in the child welfare system overall.
When you say actually makes a difference, what is your case plan actually doing that's transformative?
Yeah, well, it really solves one of the biggest problems in the child welfare system. And that is that for far too many children, they are stuck in foster care unnecessarily because of poor legal representation and gaps in communication between all the various stakeholders. Right. So imagine you've been taken from your family and you've been put into foster care. Over the course of the next maybe 2 to 3 years, you might have a dozen different caseworkers who might only work on your case for 2 to 3 months. You might have 4 different foster families. You might be in 4 different schools. You might have 6 different therapists. Wow. Your parents might have to interact with 24 different providers and deal with a public defender who they only see a few minutes before and after court. That type of complexity leads to a breakdown that ultimately leads in kids getting stuck in care and no one being able to make really what is the best decision for that child, which a lot of times is to go back to their family with the right supports, go home to a relative, grandma or an aunt or uncle. And sometimes it also is to, get adopted, right? So there's lots of different options. And what you want to be able to do is do what's best for that child, what that child actually wants, what's going to set them up for success. And we just don't have the data or the systems to actually deliver that today. And that's really what your case plan is building. We're building, think of it like MyChart for foster care. We give everyone a secure, HIPAA-compliant platform to communicate, to get and stay on the same page, to make sure people know when their court dates are, to be able to easily communicate and connect a parent with an attorney, with a caseworker, so that we can all do what's best for these kids and families.
So you're essentially adding a whole lot of functionality in a place where there's very little functionality as far as tech goes. So it seems a lot of these processes are driven, I take it, manually currently.
Yeah. This is a manual kind of notebook world. You get docket sheets printed off at the courthouse that tell you when your court dates are, and they get posted on a bulletin board. So like that's, in some counties, that's the status quo, right? You get a letter in the mail that shows up a week after court telling you that you had court. Like that doesn't help anyone. No. But that's the status quo. So, we think technology can play a role in that.
I have a quick question. With all your startups, you obviously got to know some really awesome team members. Did you bring some of your team members across to your case plan, or Um, and how do you do that? How do you manage their interest, all that kind of stuff? Can you explain a little bit about that?
Well, my last startup was all about helping people get jobs through referrals. So I'm a big fan of you build the best team possible. Like you want to hire the best person for the job. And a lot of times, like teams who have delivered great outcomes before, who know how to work well together, like, you want to team up again, right? So my co-founder and CTO for Your Case Plan is the same co-founder CTO I had for Employ Us. So we jumped in knowing we wanted to start this thing together. First engineer that we brought on was someone that was one of our first engineers at Employ Us, help us get the product up and running. And so I think it's a lot about like showing people the path. We're still a very small team, so we haven't done a whole lot of hiring. But I just kind of tell people, here's what we're working on. The assignment is similar. We want to create a big impact. We want to do that at scale, but it's a different space. It's a different work. It's a different like sales motion. It's a different customer base. It's very, very different in terms of who we're working with and who we're serving. But in some ways, you still got to build a great product. You still have to be relentless about like building a good business. So I try to like point to the things that like we have some commonalities on, and then try to find people who are really just like fired up about the mission. Because the child welfare system is like not for the faint of heart. There's not a lot of people working in it, and definitely not a lot of people trying to disrupt it or kind of change the status quo. So it's like finding people who are like technically like excellent at what they do, but also have a heart for these issues, have some personal connection to it that's going to fuel that why. It's hard to like recruit for that off of like an Indeed ad, So it's a lot of like people who have kind of seen our story, like they met our foster son, they played a part in his reunification story with his family. If there's a job opening and they're listening to this and they're like, I think I might be interested in that, I'd say like, hit me up because, I love teaming up and seeing what we can do.
Very good.
Also, we're talking about the impact that you want to have and the transformation you want to see. Tell us about some of the momentum you're feeling right now.
Well, it's funny. We started the company 366 days ago.
Okay.
To the day.
Happy birthday yesterday.
Yeah. So it's been an intense 12 months. Our first 6 months was laser focused. We really kind of lucked into how we got started. We had been building this product for a few years to help our foster son's father navigate the system. And when we launched, we actually launched with our first customer, which was the state of Oklahoma. Their Office of Family Representation provides counsel attorneys to all parents and all children in their state's child welfare system. So we landed that first, perfect customer who says, hey, we like this. We want to be first. We want to make this a key part of how we deliver high quality legal representation. So first 6 months was all about like, how do we do that really well? We started off with, 10 attorneys and 10 clients. And now we're up to, over 100 attorneys and mentors and social workers serving thousands of clients. That's just in Oklahoma.
Oh my.
So, the past 6 months, it's been a wild ride. We said we want to see, can we expand this into other states? We recently brought on North Carolina as well as West Virginia, where we're expanding and really just repeating the same thing, where we're starting by improving the quality of legal representation for parents and kids, and then expanding from there. So, our North Star is very much the number of clients we're able to impact, parents or kids.
Very good.
It's just a matter of getting it right, go slow, get it right. And then if it works, then you scale it fast, so that's really where we're at.
Let it rip. That's awesome. Do you feel like with that first customer that you had, you were kind of in a process of co-creation, getting them to kind of give you real-time feedback, asking good questions, seeing how they're responding, and that made a big difference in the product that you have today?
Yeah, I mean, everything that we've built, definitely like co-designed, co-created. We weren't often some like ivory tower trying to dictate what this should be for families or attorneys. We built it because we needed it. This was the product that like I wish I had as a foster parent. We think about like, what are we building? Would it have helped our foster son's dad bring his son home sooner?
Mm.
Would this have actually provided the type of information to that judge to help that judge make a better decision faster? So, I mean, we flew a lot of trips to Oklahoma. I was in court with a lot of families.
Oh, well.
So we, you're on the ground. And it's figuring out like, yeah, they don't really care what's on your product roadmap. They care like, what do you actually have for me today? Like, can you actually help? It's a lot of these families, like they're in crisis. They don't have the luxury of waiting. We're not like doing like focus groups or trying to like tokenize folks. It's like, I want to build this thing for you. I want you to feel like you've got ownership over it. I want you to feel like this actually helps you. So the best thing we hear is when like a family we meet with or an attorney or a social worker tells us like one of those like aha moments with their clients. Like, I wasn't able to get in touch with them until I had this app, or they documented all of their stories using the app. And we'll hear tons of crazy stories of how people are using it. Like we never thought about. But like once you give people a platform like this, like they kind of run with it. And it's really cool to see, we're getting feature requests of stuff that, you never like cook up, with a whiteboard in a brainstorming session in our office at a co-working space. There are ideas that get formed at the courthouse, like in really some of these crazy moments.
The real time, like learning from your customers. Like you've got to be having feedback loops and opportunities to hear from customers to be able to apply things and make the changes that are necessary. So at the end of the day, if you built the product and people aren't using it, or they're not, then they won't pay for it, right? So making sure that you've got the product that people are willing to use, willing to pay for, that is actually serving them well, and making the necessary changes to actually build something that's really powerful. That's awesome. One of the things you mentioned is, there are some challenges in the space. Obviously, when you're building the product, the first year, taking a lot of travel, making a lot of changes, doing a lot of updates. Talk to us a little bit about what's been really hard. And if there's moments that you thought like it might just be impossible to build this product and make a change in this space. And then I want to get to, and what's been easy. What was the thing that's just been so thrilling and encouraging? But yeah, talk to us a little bit about just what's been hard.
Yeah, I mean, like personally, this is like, you talk about startups sometimes being a roller coaster. Like you experience high highs and low lows as an entrepreneur. I can definitively say as a foster parent, you experience higher highs and lower lows. And, we got to see our foster son's case finally closed in those first 6 months after we kind of officially started this. And that was a real high and a real low all kind of wrapped in one. And, our journey to build this thing, it didn't start a year ago. It started almost 3 years ago. And we weren't kind of set off to like start a company or build a product or sell something. We literally were just like, I need to make sure that our foster son's dad has a place to store his documents, know when his court dates are, know who his attorney is, like things like that. So we spent, we sold the last startup in the summer of 21, and almost took a break for a few months, relaxed, slept in a few times, but in 2022 we started working on it, and put about $250,000 towards funding a lot of different projects and ideas. Some for-profit, some nonprofit, some tech, some not tech. And for a long time, we didn't think that your case plan would actually be a business. We just kind of assumed like this might be a nonprofit project. It might be, some free app that we have to try to go find, donors to support, or a foundation to underwrite. We weren't sure there was a real business model here or real ROI. And I think what this past year has shown is like there's absolutely a business model that aligns with our impact. So one of the biggest concerns we had, one of the biggest struggles was just like, is this a viable business or not? And it's been really exciting to see that over the past year. Feel like there's actually a model here that works, that allows us to build a business that helps a lot of people, that is also self-sufficient and, sustaining, that could scale and also, lead to a good financial outcome as well.
That's
So
that's
that's been
helpful.
what's kind of the most energizing part of it all.
Yeah. Well, we always talk at Eagle about, when a nonprofit versus a for-profit, and we've seen four nonprofits actually convert to for-profit so that and we were able to invest in them to see them like succeed and scale. One of the things we've noticed oftentimes is they find a pain point that somebody has that they're willing to pay for, right? Like that's the big difference. And then once they find that, like that organization or that company that has that pain point that they want to solve and that they're willing to pay to solve, then you can actually, take it and scale it and grow it more successfully. And when you're saying, it sounds like in your case, you're saying, hey, you discovered the states, have this problem. They're, the paper and pencil kind of pushing like model, and they want to solve it and they're willing to pay to make it better. They just didn't know that there's a better solution out there that would actually like take care of all the issues that they had. So you found the pain point, you found the solution, and now you can take it and scale it and grow with these states as they expand. So great opportunity there. Talk to us about just one of the big joys. You mentioned being in court a bunch of times. You mentioned your personal journey with foster care. Um, Tell us a little bit just about one of the stories that's just, giving you joy, help you to see the impact, or just, brings a smile to your face when you think about it. If you look back 10 years and you say, man, I remember that first year in that life that was transformed.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to get into a lot of specifics about like some of the client stories that we'll hear about. But you know, I'll share a little bit about our foster son's story because his family's already spoken publicly about this. And his uh, our foster son, when he entered our home, he had been in care for about a year, and we were his fourth home in those 12 months. And the social workers told us that his mom was bad, his dad was unknown, and he had no family. So they wanted to put him up for adoption. About a year after that, he'd been living with us for a year. It's the middle of COVID. We find out that they knew who his dad was all along, but no one ever reached out to him. And his dad heard about him, like through the grapevine, moved down to North Carolina to get him. And what we thought would be a few weeks ended up becoming a multi-year long process of this dad who, on all accounts, non-offending, good dad, who raised other kids, was stepping up to the plate, passed all the same checks and everything I had to do as a foster parent. So for a long time, I was just like raw angry at the system for like preventing them from being together. But when they finally, when his case was finally closed and he was finally reunified with his family, that was a multi-year long mission for us to preserve that family, to be able to tell our foster son that we were able to deliver on what he wanted, which was, he told us very clearly from the day he met his dad, I want to go home. I want to be with my dad. I want to be with my family. So he would tell us, like tomorrow morning, will you call my social worker to call my attorney to tell the judge I want to be out of foster care. I want to go home. A little over 6 months ago, we got to see that happen, and hearing how their family's doing, seeing pictures posted to Facebook of, like I just saw a post of them, as the like end of year graduation, ceremony,
Yeah.
with the little certificates, those are some incredible memories that I'm really glad that they're able to start forming. So that really fuels like so much of what we do. And there are stories like that. His story was not an outlier. There are stories like that we hear about literally every week from
Awesome.
families and across the states we're working in.
Fantastic.
It's so cool. Well, one of the things we talk about often in Eagle is that identity, that difference between direct impact and donated impact, right? Where, some of the companies that are out there, they build a successful business, they make some money, and then they just give a portion of it to serve a community. So when they could build a product and software and then give it to the foster care system to try to help, them grow. But then you've got this direct impact model, which gets us so excited. And that is that company where as the flywheel spins, as the company makes money, they're actually solving the problem that they're out to work on. And so in this case, as you're helping the foster care system grow and get better, you're actually making money and impacting lives all at the same time. There's so much joy in that when you're seeing the impact directly in the work. The investor is happy because the business is growing. The client that you're serving, the customer, is actually happy because they've got a product that actually meets their needs, and it brings joy to you because you're actually
definitely. I mean, if you can have a foster kid that gets to his family a week quicker, it's been worth it. If it's 3 months, it's obviously much more worth it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think you know something really important here, which is, in a perfect world, we work our way out of a job. I had one of our backers asked me point blank. He's like, Ryan, if your job is to reduce the number of days kids are in care, but you have a revenue model tied to serving more and more families. If everyone's out of the system, you won't make any money. And I was like, look, if we accomplish that,
awesome.
that would be a good reason to go out of business. So at the limit, there's alignment on no family should get torn apart because they don't have access to quality resources, quality legal representation, or the system is stacked against them, right? So I think a lot about our work, and I think about like, how do you have a system that when a family's in crisis, they actually get their needs met, that they get the support that they need, not a bunch of surveillance and a bunch of compliance and a bunch of issues that cause like long-lasting trauma. So we think of it is less of like growing the foster care system and more of how do we build a social safety net that actually delivers for families? Because we spend, trillions of dollars in this country trying to help people, and the results, do not speak for themselves. We get terrible outcomes, and that's especially true in foster care. And I just think if there's a way where a product like ours can help states spend less money and get better outcomes for families, like that's a win-win-win, where families are happier, healthier, more stable, more safe for their families. But it's also a win for our agencies. It's also a win for our communities that don't have to look at the news and see, these terrible crises happening. So for us, it's a very long-term game. It's a very complicated system. Most of our days we live in the gray area. There's not a lot of black and white days in this work. But for us, it's like deeply rooted in like delivering quality legal representation for families, like, and helping people get to like the truth of the matter, which is like, how do we actually serve these families in the best way possible?
Awesome. Hey, one of the things we didn't get to so far in the pod, but I wanted to make sure to cover. Tell me a little bit about what you've learned or what you've experienced and how the foster care system is affecting human trafficking. We've heard some crazy numbers as far as that goes, just things that I don't think the average person could possibly imagine, and would just be fascinated to see kind of your experience in that space or the things that you've learned.
Yeah, I think the startling statistics that folks might not know about, and that is that most trafficking victims, at least in the United States, like 60 to 90%, depending on how you classify a victim, have been or are currently in foster care, right? And if you think about why that is, it's kind of obvious, right? We're taking a child from their family, right? Their safe place. And maybe there were situations that made that space unsafe, right?
Yeah.
But we're putting them in the home of a stranger oftentimes. We're putting them in a situation where they are inherently more at risk. They have fewer stable connections. And many children, as they grow up, especially if they're aging out, are especially vulnerable, right? Both to traffickers, to people who would exploit them. And they don't have that same safety net that everyone else has. So we do see that there's a very strong correlation, and foster care really is a pipeline to a lot of these other systems, both the juvenile justice system, homelessness. I mean, children exiting foster care have higher rates of PTSD than our veterans, right?
Wow.
So if you think about that, you think about a patient population from like a public health perspective that is incredibly at risk. And a lot of times the people in these systems might look at an issue like trafficking. And I know this is an issue in the broader trafficking movement and think that somewhere in another country, that's not happening in our backyard. But I'll speak with foster parents who will say that their foster child ran away. And the likelihood that person is trafficked within 24 hours, skyrockets significantly. And that's happening in communities all over the country. We also don't talk enough about the fact that a lot of families, the actual parents, are victims of trafficking themselves. If you're a mom fleeing a situation with domestic violence, you might be in and out of a homeless shelter. You might be sleeping out of your car with your kids. Instead of helping that family, we might be pushing that mom further into situations where she is more likely to be exploited and trafficked. So those are the things that people don't want to talk about in the child welfare system, but they are kind of the ugly underbelly that kind of persists. And we've got to do more to root all this out, make sure people can identify what's actually happening here, and that we're not, victimizing a 16-year-old who is a victim of trafficking, or a young mom who's trying to do whatever she can to protect her family, but then ends up getting her family torn apart, right? So there's a lot of nuance here, but it is one of those things where if you solve some of the problems in foster care, you can make a giant impact in reducing human trafficking too.
Thanks for sharing that. Hey, final question for you today. If, for the audience listening, what's the next step? A lot of times when we talk about when somebody listens to a podcast, you want to make them think something, you want to make them feel something, and you want to make them, for that person who's responding, what should they do? What's a great next step for a person who's listened to this and just been like, man, how could I get involved in this space, or how could I serve this community?
Yeah. I mean, I think, the number one thing you can do, and I'll speak to folks who like me, they might be a part of a faith community. They might be a foster parent. They might know foster parents. The number one thing you can do is find ways to support the whole family, not just the children in care. It's important that we do things like pack backpacks and get, gifts for Christmas, those things are good. And I don't want to discount that. But, let's maybe take it one step further and see what can we actually do to support families, right? If you're a foster parent, obviously, or a social worker or an attorney, you can go to yourcaseplan.com. You can join our waiting list. You can see if we're available in your state. But if you're not kind of currently working in the system, I just encourage you to learn more about the child welfare system, learn about what people are doing, learn about ways that you can get involved to both prevent the need for foster care in the first place, and ultimately to make sure that the system that is in place is actually delivering for families. And there's a lot of ways to do that. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I talk a lot about different ways that you can make a difference in this space. And there's a lot of other leaders who have built some phenomenal organizations actually doing that on the front lines. Yeah. So I just encourage you to dig in and find out ways that you can make a difference here.
Awesome. Ryan, thanks so much for sharing.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Really appreciate it. Ray, glad to have you co-host with me today, big guy.
Thank you very much.
Great to have some folks, a brother from another part of the world, involved in the conversation.
Thank you for opening your heart, Ryan. That was great.
Oh man, yeah.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me, guys. It's awesome to kick this off with you guys.
All right.
See ya.
See you next time.